Hi, Josh. Good to see you.
Hey, you as well?
You've been up to a lot of things since we last talked, of doing a
hmm
lot of training. I'm really impressed. So, what you do with bodywork is you're an adaptive bodywork practitioner and
hmm
a functional patterns human foundations practitioner
Yep.
therapist. Is that about accurate?
Just about right. Yeah, basically it'll stem like from the more holistic side to the more standard medical side. On that end, I have my exercise therapy certification. So again, if you're post-operative, would I be dealing with something like that? The functional patterns and the adaptive body work, again, is going to be a little more mind-body connection, a little more on that integrative holistic portion, and then in me just trying to bridge the gaps between the two.
Yeah, because they really do function together, right? Like if you're always like this because you're stressed out, something's going to happen in your body that isn't good.
Exactly. And then again, you put 20, 30 plus years of that on a body that's constantly grinding itself down, you're going to run into some unfortunate issues.
So tell me a little bit about how you would assess somebody's problems and how you would go about correcting them. Because as I said, now we've been under stress for so long that
hmm
probably any habits, bad habits that we've picked up along the way have been exacerbated by what's been happening in the world.
Exactly. Well, glad to say a good part of it is a lot of detective work. So literally just from the onset of the conversation, how do they hold themselves? How do they speak? How are they sitting? And then from there, a lot of it's going to be simple functional movement, everything from breathing to a gait walking pattern to how do you get up out of your chair. Because just the basics that you do every day, if they're compromised, again, if you want to go run a marathon, chances are you're a little bit compromised on that end. So basically, just really finding that good baseline so you can just like breathe, stand correctly, and walk correctly. If we hit those three, then we can move you on up from there.
So what have you noticed? Have you noticed any rise in certain conditions over the past few months?
Oh, hugely, hugely. There's the classic one everyone will probably hear, which is anterior pelvic tilt. So basically, pelvis is going to tip forward predominantly from sitting for too long. But one that I've definitely seen that really couples with that from people I've worked with is they're going to have a lot more pent up kind of release, not release, my apologies, pent up kind of chest. So the rib cage is actually lifted and tilted back on top of the hips going forward.
Good Lord.
Because obviously it's a stressful situation, so just breathing kind of gets a little bit impacted from it, and then it's just a bit of a compensation from where the hips are being tilted. The chest just want to go back. So, and then usually depending on the person, even worse, maybe their head wants to go tilt down to try and find that horizon. So they become a weird zigzag pattern of just pent up muscles and tissue.
It sounds so uncomfortable. I can't imagine that we do this to ourselves, but we do.
Yeah, yeah, and again, not to put too much shock on it, but even again, like studies have shown where it's even something like 32 minutes of sitting, you slowly begin to form adhesions in your hip joints and stuff like that just from sitting down in a chair for that long.
Wow. And I guess when people are adapting to their home offices, they're not necessarily able to get a table they can stand up at or ergonomic equipment
Yeah.
that I think it's been a huge change and a lot of adapting, but it's really important to um, to fix those things.
Because again, if you're unfortunately, we're all again, data entry office work is going to be a very common thing for probably the foreseeable future. So making sure these people are capable of doing that, then getting up and proceeding on with life without having too many compromises there is definitely something hopefully they would can consider if they're going to set everyone up for that extended home work environment.
So, are there a few exercises or tips that you can share with people before they come and see you at the wellness clinic?
Well, not to tip them off to what I'm looking for, but yeah, one of the big things, of course, will always be how you're breathing. Because again, if we're not getting optimum oxygen, everything else is going to be offset. So I'm always a big fan of a body scan in the morning or at night, which is essentially usually can be guided by a YouTube video or a audio clip someone has, but essentially it's just drawing attention to where do you find points of tension on your body. So you could just lay down, they'll guide you through, and then be like, oh, maybe my hip feels like I can't exactly turn my leg out, or my head feels naturally tilted. And then from there, usually I always like to tell people when you think of your core, think of a box. With that, every side should be engaged when we breathe. So we shouldn't just have that very shallow where the breath just sits in the chest. We should feel that expansion, that pressure around a whole area of the abdomen to make sure we have some semblance of capacity. Again, not to put in any fire and brimstone and shock and awe, but when we lack certain abilities to actually take a proper inhale, the lungs, they're going to expand. They're going to expand around your heart. So that heart is going to sense that enclosing around it, which innately will cause a little more stress. So again, a simple physiological adaptation that's going to obviously be a bit of a negative feedback and further improve.
I think it even gets down to the point where we haven't really been aware of our bodies. We don't know how to read them. We're not paying attention. We're not checking in.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I remember I was talking with another physical therapist about this, and it's like, we just go back and we can blame Descartes for all this when he started with that whole mind-body kind of separation, and we've stuck with it for what, like 400 years. It's only now in the Western side where we brought in a little Eastern influence to actually try and, reproach this whole thing.
Yeah.
Which is something that I've, again, trying to find that nice bridging of the gap from the strict medical scientific Western view, and how can you best kind of extrapolate that and put it into something a little more tangible for the average person when you want to talk about like mind, body, spirit. What does it mean in the 21st century in Canada? Because not everyone obviously is going to take that bite.
But it is so important. What I find with people that come to our wellness clinic is that the regular model has failed them somewhere along the way, and they're ready to take control of their health and say, yes, I want to get better. And that as a practitioner, you're just helping them to access that information about their bodies.
And that's something I've always put forward. Again, with the more traditional model, some people still have the very much of a fix me attitude. Like they put the responsibility on someone else, and whoever walks in and sees me, I let them know it's like straight up a team effort, and you're probably doing more work than I am. Again, I'm just here to guide you through and make sure that I don't see you too often at the end of the day. So hopefully they can get that and then be willing to put in a little work. Other than that, they should be right as rain.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key right there, right? It's like training a dog. Okay, the trainer can do a great job with your dog, and then you take the dog home and don't do anything for 2 weeks and wonder why it didn't take.
Exactly. And believe me, like, I'm glad again, hopefully, that the positive silver lining, if you will, with this whole lockdown thing, people starting to realize maybe things they're lacking in their life, be it movement quality, going out, just exploring things and doing things to benefit themselves. So hopefully people will be more accepting of taking that, like breaking it down to its bare elements and trying to build themselves back up for the long term. So I definitely seen that too. Like some people I've talked to have been like, yeah, like I've spent the last 3 months at home trying to figure out what exercise is and what relaxation is, and I don't really know what I'm trying to do. So I definitely want to find out what that means and how can you help me. And lo and behold, that's what I'm there for.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Tell me about your most recent studies.
My most recent studies. Okay. So pre-COVID, I was doing an intensive course about freeing up the diaphragm, the ribs, and trying to restore, again, this lovely thing known as breathing correctly. And then the following course I did right after that was trying to restore kind of structural integrity to the spine. So again, just like any joint in the body, if the tissues kind of are pulling it awkwardly in a direction, that's going to cause a little more of a forced closure on one side, and that's where our grinds come down, or disc degeneration, slip disc, things like that. So it was definitely a hugely eye-opening course, again, when you get to the very, very kind of deeper workings of how to make someone have an effective breath again, let alone like trying to rebalance and restack someone's spine with manual treatment and then exercise. And then following this stuff, I have a few more specific towards the head, neck, and jaw that I'm going through as well. And that'll be my, for my newest licensing, I guess I'll call it, certifications for structural integration, which is going to be like a 5-year course. And this is the first big milestone I'll be hitting, is this initial kind of like superficial tissue manipulation.
That's amazing.
So it's a long road, but I look forward to every minute of it, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm going to post links to where people can find you. Of course, you're going to be in our newsletter every month now that we have something to have news about.
True.
And you're at Planet Botanix right now on Sundays, which is really amazing, and I hope people will take advantage of that. Do you
Hope so
have any
too.
last words of wisdom?
Last words of wisdom. Oh, well, very simple. Now that we're able to get out and live our lives, just try those things that you wanted to try again and make sure we don't just sink back into the same old rut that we found ourselves prior to all this. Simple as that.
Do you have any tips on your website, like we
Yeah.
just talked about? Yeah, great.
Yep. Again, usually there's little editorial pieces, little educational bits, anything just to kind of hopefully get people up and running in a regular human fashion.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for talking with me, and we'll post all the links and all the goodies, and make sure you get down to Planet Botanix and see Josh.
Yes, please. All right.
Thanks so
Thank
much
you
for
very
talking
much.
with me. Talk soon.
Thank you.